Hi everybody, this is Olivia from Alexandrienne, and today we are going to finish up our series on lines using letters, words, a variety of images. I've covered a lot about lines with lines, but in order for you to get a good understanding, I kind of felt like you needed to see how they work together, and the only way I could think of to do that was to show you letters or words. So here we go. What I'm going to talk about first is an image that I have taken from one of the very first videos that I did on lines. This image has been broken down into 4 steps. The first one being just a plain sans serif straight A. Second one, I enhanced it. Third, enhanced it more. And the fourth, I finished it up. So let's go into each one just a little bit. On the very first one, it is just a straight sans serif A. And I wanted to find out how I could make it mine, how I could transform it from just a plain nondescript letter into something that was my creation. So we'll move on to number 2. I thought, well, I wanted to leave the basic letter there and create from that basic letter, which I think is a really wonderful way to start. You have your template, so to speak, that you build on, which is just perfect if you are just starting out and learning. So what I did was start on the left side. I kept it the same basic line that was on the first letter, and I just thickened it up a little so I could put a pattern, a color, anything that I wanted in there. It's not very big, but that was okay. And I went ahead and decided I wanted to add a little piece of art to the bottom, or a serif, which I did. And I kept it all masculine with the exception of the curve into the serif. And I liked it. I thought it looked pretty good. So then on to the third step. I, again, kept the very same line that I started with and just added to it. What I wanted to do was to make it different in some way. So I decided to end it with another little piece of art or a serif of sorts, but I wanted to make it feminine since the other side's ending was masculine. So I turned it into a swirl and kept it about the same width throughout the entire length. So that gave me 2 areas that I could build on that were creative. And so the fun really comes when we start into number 4. I had the mostly masculine on the left and the feminine ending on the right, and I wanted to tie those 2 together somehow. So I thought about it for a few moments, and I also wanted to keep it interesting still. So what I did was I decided to echo the bottom parts of the A in the horizontal bar, but I wanted to have balance. So what I did was take the swirl from the bottom vertical section and put it on the left side of the horizontal bar, and then I swung it down and around and ended it with a similar shape as what was on the bottom left section of my vertical bar. And just for fun, I gave it a little bit of dimension by putting it behind the vertical bar on the right side so it looks like it was, jutting out from behind. And then I added some circles for interest. And that's pretty much it. But if you take a look at the whole visual here, you can see where I started out with just this plain 3-line letter. And what I ended up with was really creative. It's totally different, but I started with the very plain, simple A. Thought about it, came up with a few creative ideas, including both masculine and feminine, making for sure I added balance and added a few decorative parts to it. So you can see that this was a very easy process, creative use of lines, and it really only took a few minutes. So this should actually be enough to show you that changing a plain bland letter into something that looks fun, creative, and is your own is really not a hard process. And it all does start with lines. So if you are just starting out learning how to create the alphabet, this would be a very good way to start because you do have the template and you build from there instead of looking at a blank piece of paper, which is fine too. It's just if you have a problem with the blank piece of paper, try this method. Okay, now on to the next. We just talked a lot about the evolution of the letter A, but I wanted to take it further. That way you can see how the lines change into something totally different. We start with the very first evolution from the kind of block letter into my first creation of the letter A. And then you can see where it transformed even more. If you look at it, you can see where the vertical lines are close to the same, especially the one on the right side with the swirl at the bottom. The one on the left, I changed from what would be a typical sort of serif into this curve. And I also changed the very top. I added a swirl. The biggest change, I would say, was the horizontal bar. I took out the swoop, if you want to call it that, and added an upside down triangle with a star under it. I wanted to create something that I thought a dangle would really fit well with. And not saying it's any better or worse than the first one, just different. And here is what it looks like in the colored version. I painted it, added stripes to the left bar, kept the right side solid, and finished it with, I'd say, more of a neutral color palette, so it would have worked for either gender. But that's how it looks with dangles on it. I really enjoyed the dangle part. Okay, now it gets a little more interesting. This is where I took that letter and totally made it feminine, but you can see where I almost flipped it. The left side is the one with the swirl, and the right side is the one that has that bar at the bottom that's kind of angled. And I changed quite a bit of it. At the very top, I started out very, very narrow and then got bigger as it went down vertically. Not so much on the left side, but on the right side. I wanted to be able to add something that was bigger on the inside, my little canvas that I talk about sometimes. And on the top, that transformed as well. It's still a swirl, but it's a double swirl and it's thin. That way I could add a little spark of interest. And you can see on the dangles, to me, that is really what made it so much more feminine than the one prior. There's hearts and there's a rose, lots of circles, only two shapes that I see that could be considered masculine, which are the two diamonds. But now on the horizontal crossbar, I kind of went back to the very first one that I did, only again it was flipped opposite. That way I would have the balance of the swirl and the little curved end. And now on to, wow, boy did it change. I had so much fun with this. You can see the evolution, but it really doesn't look very much the same with that big swooping bottom line off to the right. And even the bottom serif on the left, it goes almost like an S shape and ends in a swirl. There are some similarities like the crossbar, but wow, did it change. It's bold. It's all in warm colors, reds, oranges, yellows. You can't miss it. That is for sure. And now I wanted to show you what those lines look like all put together into a word. And it's adventurous. It really is adventurous. If you look at it, you can see that it is definitely bold. It is not pretty feminine. If I had to pick a gender, I would say masculine, and that is because all of the patterns in the letters are stripes with a few variations. Some are at an angle, some follow the curve of the line, and there's a few dots, and there's a checkerboard, and at the very top is a star. That could be either or. But the overall feeling to me is definitely either masculine or neutral. And it was so much fun to create. All of these really truly are. Here's what it looks like with dangles. Now the dangles add a little more femininity to it because there's hearts and there's at least 3 lines that are wavy, which is feminine. So that added a feminine touch to it, so that really helps it go more into the neutral side. And now we're looking at all of these letters from the very first block sans serif A to the first evolution, then into the second evolution with Dangles. On the third A, I wanted to try to make it more masculine as compared to the next evolution, which is more feminine. So I was experimenting to see what I could do to change it from kind of the neutral one, which was the first evolution, into a more masculine shape, and then into a more feminine shape. And then at the bottom, the bold, totally out there A. Well, I say it's totally out there until you get to the very last one on the far right. That's really out there. It is totally feminine in shape. I don't think there's a straight line on it, except for the pattern that I put inside of the outlines. That is all masculine. So to me, I needed to do that for balance because it was so swirly and feminine. And of all of these, I have to say that had to be the most fun, relaxing, whimsical A that I made. Anyway, I wanted to show you this so you can see where you start out with just a basic block sans serif straight line letter and how it can evolve. And there's so much more that I'm not showing. It's a never-ending evolution. How's that? You can change it in so many ways, probably infinite ways, especially since you have dangles, because every time you change a dangle, you change the image. So I have a little challenge for you, if you care to take me up on it. I would love to see you pick a letter, any letter, and do something similar to what I did. Start modifying it and then create a different letter, maybe try masculine, feminine, a combination, and then really get super creative and out there and see what you end up with, and then compare it to the very first one. I would love to see the results, or at least hear about them. Okay, now on to the next. On this image, there are 2 C's. The first C is a feminine C, and the second C is all masculine. So we were just going to talk a little bit about the differences between the two. And I did want to mention that the second C, the masculine C, I have put in my book. And I did not realize what challenges there were in taking a feminine image and turning it into a masculine image. It really was quite the challenge on how I was going to do it and have it look good. I'm not saying everybody's going to have a challenge with it. It was just me personally. If you look at my work, almost all of it's really swirly, feminine. And so this was a little bit of a challenge for me. But I just wanted to talk about a little bit to show you that yes, indeed, it certainly can be done. The curve on the left side and the little serifs and the circles, everything on here is feminine. And it's very easy to see, very easy to understand it's feminine. It looks feminine. And I'd have to say the opposite is true of the C on the right. I mean, just as strongly as the left looks feminine, I think the one on the right looks masculine. Totally. But one thing I did on this, which much trial and effort, it looks somewhat three-dimensional because the far left vertical line is much shorter and goes out and downward or out and upward depending on if you're in the top or the bottom of the horizontal lines. So they end up much lower and much higher than the far left line, which gives it a sense of perspective, which is something that you can do with letters if you like to have challenges and fun with perspective, trompe l'oeil, different things like that. You can certainly include it in your dangles. So this is really a pretty brief one. I just wanted to show you, some obvious differences between the two, and that you can transform something totally feminine into something totally masculine and vice versa. Okay, carrying on. One more quick tip. If you look at this image with the letter I, you will see a few different images there. The one on the far left is the finished image. The one in the center is the plain eye. And the weird shapes on the right are the overlays on top of the eye that create the finished eye. And all I was wanting to point out today was that if you take these and either do it on the computer, or if you're creating it by hand, of course you'd be drawing them. I did this on the computer to show you that when you put them on top of your eye, all you have to do is erase the lines that you want to appear to be behind the eye. And that will give the impression of a back and forth, behind, forward zigzag. So it's a really quick tip, but it can come in really handy. Okay, that's it. And thank you so much for watching the video today. I hope you got a lot out of it. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you again soon. Much love, Olivia.